Is everything truly political? Or are we confusing ourselves by conflating politics with everything? Let's talk about that. Before I go into dissecting this quote and give my viewpoints for the same, I would actually go into the history behind where did this quote come from. So, if you want to skip the history part, you can definitely do so. I'll put down the timestamps as well, so it would be easier for you to skip to the main topic instead of getting to the history. This quote, everything is political, was actually said by Thomas Mann, who was a German novelist and a Nobel Prize winner in literature. Talking about Mann, he was initially somebody who had a lot more conservative stance when it comes to politics. He actually believed that Germans would not accept democracy because they were essentially very unpolitical. He also doubled down on this idea and he supported militaristic and anti democratic nationalism. In his essay called Gedanke im Krieg, which is called Thoughts in Wartime, in this essay he ranted a lot about how modernity was degenerating and quote unquote it was swarming with vermin of spirits like maggots. And when his brother Henrik, who was a leftist, condemned these sentiments, he wrote a 500 pager as a response to that. Talk about a family argument, I guess. And especially for somebody who says that Germans are unpolitical, he had a lot to say when it comes to politics. But surprisingly, this conservative stance of Thomas Mann did not last very long. And he was actually seen supporting the Weimar Republic, which was a democratic government. So people were very surprised as to what really changed this man and his political views. Scholar James N. Wade argued that this was probably caused by the shock of assassination of Walter Rathenow. He was actually a liberal Jew and he was a foreign minister of Weimar Republic. Apparently, he was killed by the right wing terrorists. The thing is that Rathenow was a very well respected man, and Thomas Mann was concerned that the assassination was caused by the very ideology that Mann had protected and supported, and this led to a lot of anti democratic sentiments and violence. His views further shifted to the left during the rise of Nazism, and in 1949, he declared that he was not a communist. He, in fact, believed that Soviet communism was as totalitarian as Nazism. However, he found communism, in theory, having at least some relations to human ideals and a better future. Now, like, now that the history is ended, we do know that Thomas Mann was not unpolitical. He was very much political. Now, what does everything is political actually mean? It means no matter what you do in your daily life, be it trivial or not, they do carry a political undertone. Your everyday decisions, your everyday actions, your thoughts, your biases, they do have political impact. Now, let's say I buy something from a fast fashion brand like Shein, for example. uh, Me buying from that company creates a demand, and that demand is fulfilled by the exploitation of child labor. This is just me, but now multiply the same decision by thousands or millions of people who do consume fast fashion. You have just fueled the exploitation of marginalized communities just to fulfill that demand. Some people would argue that, if I do stop buying from companies like Shein, it really does not make any sort of impact because there are still millions of people who do consume fast fashion. But if every single consumer of fast fashion comes to a realization that, hey, whatever I am consuming is actually coming from somebody else's misery, and they eventually stop buying from fast fashion, it might create a situation of boycott. People would start boycotting the brands, and that would further lead to fast fashion not being in business. I mean, because of this whole fast fashion trend, I see that as the years have gone by, 100% cotton is so difficult to find. And even if you do find, they are expensive because everything is now polyester or mixed fabric. But yeah, like I was saying, if everybody had a similar viewpoint, they might have stopped buying from fast fashion. But the reality is that everybody does not have similar political viewpoint. Human civilizations came into existence because of our need to live in a pack where every person in the pack has a role to play. Together, their actions help in protecting, nurturing, and growing the community. In a way, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. In a somewhat similar sense, Carl Schmitt, in his work The Concept of the Political, stated that in a political environment, we have friends and enemies. People come together to protect a way of life, and any threat to that is seen as enemy. Well, that gave rise to a lot of different political ideologies, and each ideology has its own staunch supporters. People in these ideological groups are always afraid of the other side. So they further put themselves in echo chambers, which validates their ideologies and validates their fear of the other side. Even when it comes to people who say that they are not political, well, the only reason why you can say that you are apolitical is because you are privileged. You know that your life is not getting affected by politics, so why even waste your energy to have any political stance? And the other group of apolitical people are the ones who are scared to be shunned or maybe disowned by their friends or cancelled. I'll talk about cancel culture in another video, but yeah, these people would support ideology which are probably trending, or maybe they will just say that, hey, like, I don't want to talk about politics, just because they are afraid that if they take one stance, the other group of people will probably attack them or maybe cancel them. For example, you can look at Sydney Sweeney, like after the uh, infamous American Eagle ad that she did. She was talking about how, she's not political, she's an artist, she did not do any wrong, yada yada yada. But secretly, she is political. She has a political stance. She's just too afraid to say it out loud, because saying it out loud would mean that the huge chunk of people who are probably liberal would cancel her or attack her, which they are anyway doing. This was just an example of a celebrity, but I have seen in my day to day lives that there are some people who claim to be apolitical just so that they do not get shunned by their friends or their close relatives, which I understand it's a valid fear, but these people don't realize that being silent or being apolitical, even if it looks like a safe choice, it actually creates an impact. You may not know, but your silence could actually lead to a dangerous situation where we might end up living in a totalitarian rule. There is another group of people who think that anything that threatens their way of life or their ideology, it is too political, while anything that is sort of supportive of the idea is apolitical or normal. For this, I can give an example of how older generations like boomers or Gen X say that millennials or Gen Zs are so woke just because we support a healthier lifestyle. Doesn't matter if it comes to mental health or physical health. These older generations say that, oh, like mental health was not such an issue in our times, like depression was not a thing during our time, and the anxiety was not a thing during our time. Well, Karen, during those times, people were not diagnosed. Mental health existed, it's just that they were not diagnosed. And people, after war and everything, people did suffer from PTSD, people did have anxiety. It just wasn't something that was researched upon. Another thing that I have noticed that some people, even if some political viewpoint supports their way of life, they still do not support it because they do not want it to appear preachy. In this scenario, I would take an example of how I have seen a lot of celebrities say that they are not feminists because they do not want to be stereotyped as, a high maintenance woman, or like a woman with an attitude just because she calls herself a feminist. I want you to think about what you do in your day-to-day lives. I'll ask you some questions and you might introspect on those. Are you the type of person who litters? Like, do you throw small wrappers or whatever outside the window or onto the street, or maybe you see a huge chunk of garbage somewhere and you throw the garbage there? Or are you the type of person who waits for a proper dustbin to appear so that you can throw your garbage in it? Are you the type of person who would trust a man over a woman when it comes to a certain work? For example, like if you are presented with a male mechanic or a female mechanic, would you choose the male over the female? Do you doom scroll, trapping yourselves in a loop that is intentionally created by the capitalists so that you can stay on the app, or do you take control over it? Are you quick to defend the male artists that you listen to, while at the same time calling Swifties deranged for supporting their artists? Do you say not all men while still being afraid when your daughter, your sister, or your mother is alone with a random man? Do you say I support the art, not the artist, while the art itself is influencing young kids with the skewed idea of what love looks like? Love where they are mistreated and abused. So, this last question actually brings me into this thought that I had, that a lot of people think art and literature is not political, and it is by far the most laughable opinion that I have heard so far. All art is political, and it is not in the same sense that you think. A lot of people, when they hear this sentence, they jump to the conclusion that a form of art is being created intentionally as a political statement. But that is not the case. It doesn't necessarily mean that all art has political themes, but that it just reflects the society and it reflects our values. And you can take an example of Jane Austen. When you read Jane Austen, you you are shown how the society of those times worked. You can see the aspect of marriage when it comes to a woman's life, and it reflects a lot about wealth, social hierarchy, class system, and etc. etc. Similarly, whatever artwork that you consume, be it movies, shows, video games, or maybe art themselves, uh, you can, in a way, see certain political undertones in those if you look into it further, obviously. Some people see that they consume a certain type of media, be it movies, shows, video games, books. They consume these things as a form of escapism. It's not politics. But the need for escapism through art is actually a message saying that our current living state is not comfortable, it is tiresome. We want to escape from reality because reality is actually draining us. I believe that politics is not just about right versus left or one political party versus the other. It is about a lot of other phenomena that is affecting society and our day-to-day lives. I know I myself am very much tired of politics, and sometimes I just don't want to think too deep. It's natural for people to retaliate and say that I just want to turn off my brain. I don't want to, think about all of these negative things and, just be happy for one day. It is all this negativity is making me feel miserable. And I understand that viewpoint as well. In my case, when I eat something that is essentially non vegan, the inner critique in me yells and says that, oh my God, Ruchira, you are like eating this at the cost of, the nature, the ecosystem. Like, you don't even know what all has happened behind the scenes. And trying to be vegan is a very exhausting task for me as well because, monitoring everything that you consume, be it food or not, it becomes a very tedious task because you do not know. A lot of times, companies hide information. A lot of times, you yourself have to do a lot of, checks, and it becomes exhausting. So I understand the sentiment of wanting to, disconnect from all of this and be happy on our own. But it brings the question, it makes me think like, can humanity ever be truly happy? Can we ever find peace and joy which is not at the cost of somebody else's misery? So I'm going to end this video on this question because my throat is hurting a lot. I was actually recording this part and I realized that since the space in my mobile has finished, it stopped recording and it did not record this entire last portion. So I have to re record, and now my throat is hurting. So I'm going to end this video on the question, and uh, I would love to hear your opinions on this topic. If I have missed out something, do let me know what you guys think about all of this. And yeah, bye bye.